Yes, we are live. There is a slight delay in the transmission, but Georgiana, please, you can take it away.
Thank you, Rafael. Hello, welcome to the New Center for Research and Practice public session with the programmers. The New Center is a para-academic institution that offers cutting-edge seminars on art, philosophy, and the humanities in general. Within it, we run 4 certificate programs, each of them led by one of our programmers, some of whom are here. History, Design, and World Making by Thomas Moynihan, Art and Curatorial Studies run by Cécile Malaspina, Critical Philosophy run by Reza Negarestani, and Transdisciplinary Studies by Jason Mohaghegh. This is also our anniversary this season. We aim to reflect on a decade of maintaining our independence, surviving, and growing as an online educational institution in arts and humanities. And all that thanks to the support of our network of instructors, members, students, researchers, as well as institutional partners. And aside from the programmers, we also have Rafael here from the student services. And he will talk about our upcoming workshops and clarify some frequently asked questions. And of course, towards the end of the session, he's there to answer anything you would wish to ask about the process. And yeah, we'll get there in a minute. As for me, I'm Georgiana Kojokaru. I am a full scholarship certificate student at the New Center. I belong to the transdisciplinary cohort. And thanks to the rare support I found there, I am currently a writer. I'm based in Berlin, and I'm really, really excited to be part of this public program, and especially of this public session that inaugurates the fall-winter 2024-2025, like I said, which also marks an anniversary for the New Center. As some of you may know, the applications for the certificate programs are currently open, and there is the possibility to receive full and partial scholarships. And this would be a great chance to get to know more about the application process itself, to meet the programmers, to know about the New Center, and also what are the upcoming seminars about. And just a reminder, applications are open until the 26th of August. So just about midnight, but maybe you want to send them in 10 seconds before that. And they should include a cover letter and a writing sample that showcase your intellectual interest and also clarify your need for financial relief. There is a thing to add here. The Global South or applicants from the Global South will automatically be considered for a 50% scholarship, and half of our full scholarship recipients are from the Global South. Half of them are women. What's new this season is also the launch of the Cassia Siqueira Scholarship, an additional full scholarship specifically for transgender candidates. And this one has a later deadline on September 23rd. And like I said, aside from our traditionally and incredible lineup of seminars, the New Center is offering now its largest yet selection of workshops, and Rafael will speak about these offers. Rafael, I'll give it up to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgiana. I'm very happy to be here to talk about the workshops. So these workshops were an initiative that we began, I think, around 2 years ago, and they have been very successful every step of the way, and particularly because like that, not only this skill-based format that we adopt in them has been very well received, by students from within the new center, but also from external enrollees. But also for me, the testament to the success of this format is the quality of the projects and of the feedback that we have been receiving from the students. And to kind of expand in this direction, we are offering the following workshops in the upcoming fall/winter 2024-25 season. The first of them is that I wanted to talk about is Angelicism, a User's Guide, which is basically focused on the philosophical underpinnings and on the practice of online posting, and also on vertical filmmaking, on the production of what Angelicism coins themselves as internet cinema hybrids, documentary internet cinema hybrids. This one will feature multiple exercises and asynchronous exercise in class, and also synchronous exercises. And we'll talk about editing and scripting of vertical videos together with 01, and also with Lola Yusidman, was one of the producers of Film 01. And another very interesting workshop that we have in our lineup, this one is by Derek Hales and Newspiller, titled Reflexive Architecture 2. And this workshop is going to be focused a lot on the creation on world building as an architectural task, and also something aimed by the most recent technologies such as Web3, NFT, and 3D modeling. And will be conducted by Derek Hales and Newspiller. And basically, these workshops will be split in two strands. One of them will be drawing on Newspiller's work towards a visionary, the setting of a visionary architecture, and the encounter between architecture and cyberculture. And the other strand will be also talking about this idea of world making and how it applies to architecture, and including the practical side with and how software and hardware are both implicated in world building, and including both in the Web3, NFTs, but also in emerging metaverses and other 3D platforms. Particularly, this workshop will focus on the usage of Unity and Houdini, and but also be open to other 3D platforms. And there is no entry requirement. So this is really important. Like, the idea is that this workshop equips you to experiment with reflexive architecture and world building through the process of bringing together the theoretical and the practical. And the third one, this one is taught by one of our alumnus, Manuel Correa. He's going to teach a workshop titled Film and Forensic towards documentary practice. And he will be teaching people how to deal with evidentiary techniques and forensic techniques for documentary filmmaking, such as image analysis, geolocation, open source intelligence analysis, and data mining, and explore how these tools can actually be instrumental for investigating filmic facts. And for that, they will engage with non-optical image making, such as AI videos, voiceovers, and also the usage of found footage. And the final outcome of this would be the production of a vertical film from 3 to 15 minutes within a group that will be assembled during the workshop. And Romulo Moraes, also an alumnus of the New Center, will deliver a workshop on writing musical criticism, particularly but not only talking about pop music. And in this one, participants will receive practical training on how to write effectively and synthetically about music. And the workshop will be very focused on the forms in which music criticism can take. So, for example, both in social media, publishing, and so on and so forth, and also use different experiment with different forms of musical criticism that would include short reviews, one-liners, video commentary, and even a longer essay, which will be the final outcome of the workshop. And as you can see, each of them will be focusing on producing something at the end of the day. So on the Angelicism 01 workshop, user's guide, you're going to be producing a vertical video based on social media found footage. In Derek Hales, you'll be focused on the build on the literal task of world making, particularly by exploring and working together with colleagues using 3D platforms. And on Manuel, a vertical film from 3 to 15 minutes using the techniques of forensic analysis. And then Romulo, the production of successive forms of and different forms of music criticism, depending on your interests. And yes, I hope you enjoy the selection. And I pass the word back to Georgiana so she can introduce you a little bit more about the News Center.
Thanks, Raphael. I actually am curious. Maybe I'll be back to you with a question at the end of the session. Yeah, so as some of you may know, we are an international nonprofit higher education institute, and we offer seminars in arts, humanities, and sciences. They are at graduate and professional development level, certificate programs, workshops, or self-standing seminars, like I said before, exhibitions, residencies, as well as conferences. And I would say many other encounters of all sorts. And we have a newly announced program, History, Design, and World Making, and then our three ongoing programs in art and curatorial practice, critical philosophy, and transdisciplinary studies. If you chose to study at the New Center, you can practice graduate and professional level research in a manner that does not interrupt any pre-existing artistic or academic or professional aspirations or obligations. And instead, the programs are designed so that they complement, enhance, and intensify what you already are engaged with. And if you are interested in knowing more about us, you can check on our YouTube channel and also access our website, thenewcenter.org. Notably, if you are going through the list of our upcoming seminars, this season will feature both 5 seminars and workshops taught by our former students. And as well, if you have any questions that might not be answered during the presentation, you can write them in the YouTube chat, and we can read them after and be back to you as soon as possible. So without further ado, I think it's time to introduce our programs. The History, Design, and World Making, led by Thomas Moynihan, is working on the productive collusion between design, architecture, and philosophy. This program recognizes the historical roots of design and architecture and how various philosophies and theories shape these disciplines. As I said, this is a newly announced program, and the seminars include the 200 Years of Life Part 2 by Ben Woodward, Abducting the Future, Strategic Thought and the Logic of Military and Political Inquiry by Sam Forsyth, From Inference to Intervention on the Operative Logics of Machine Learning by Magdalena Krzysztoforska, and Critical Collapsology, Theory and the Ends of Worlds by Richard Hames. Then the Art and Curatorial Practices is run by Cécile Malaspina. The program starts with the recognition that the students enrolled are artists, curators, publishers, editors, and writers who have skin in the game of art. It thus fosters an emancipatory turn in the context of global digitization and climate chaos, from overall lament to a particular investigation of the possibilities for art in the long run. And the seminar list includes Simondon, Imagination and Invention by Cécile Malaspina, Art Writing in Context by Pablo Larios, Variations of the Great Refusal Part 2 by Cécile Malaspina. Then next is the Critical Philosophy program run by Reza Negarestani. This one is devoted to developing philosophy adequate to addressing the problems and questions posed by the 21st century, mainly the necessary transformations of concepts of reason and thought as they pertain to the development of artificial intelligence and automation. And within this program, we have Catechism for a Revolutionary Philosophical Human Being by Reza Negarestani, Feminism in the Canon of Philosophy, a Research Lab by Kirsten Fuchs, The Geographers That Ate Themselves by Carl Olson, Cognitive Mapping in Althusser, Salars, and Gianotti by J.P. Caron, and Timely Thoughts on War and Death by Franziska Einer and Austin Gross. And finally, we have Transdisciplinary Studies led by Jason Mohaghegh, which explores the unique collusion between literature, poetry, anthropology, psychoanalysis, cultural studies, media theory, the arts, sciences, design, and vernacular knowledge by engaging with strategies that capture complexity, cultivate new ecologies of knowledge, and affect individual and collective transformations. This program can be considered as an alternative to cultural studies or to comparative literature. And the seminars included in this program are Antonina Artaud and Journey to Mexico by Stuart Kendall, Alien and Illogical Powers, Incubation and Other Oniric Forces by Rainer Hensche, and Fear by Jason Mohaghegh. And as you can tell, many of these seminars cover topics that traverse the programs. If you check the website, you will notice that a lot of them are cross-listed and they don't belong to any of the program or to many programs at once. And now to start with the presentation, I will introduce you briefly each programmer, and then I will pass the mic, or in the case of our first speaker, the Zoom screen to them. So Thomas Moynihan, the programmer for History, Design and World Making, is a UK-based writer with a doctorate in philology from Oriel College, Oxford, and is currently a visiting researcher at Cambridge University Center for the Study of Existential Risk. Moynihan is the author of X-Risk 2020 and Spinal Catastrophism 2019. And currently he's working on a book exploring how history's horizons have expanded throughout the past as people have slowly woken up to the ways in which present action can scar the future for life on Earth. Unfortunately, Thomas was not able to present today due to an emergency, but he did send a video and he will talk to us briefly about this program. Raphael, should I share the video myself?
Yes, you can share, please. Thank you, Georgina.
Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
As you all know, I'm the programmer for the History, Design and World Making program at the New Center. So I'm going to talk a little bit, very briefly about what that program is, what the scope of it is, what the aim and goal is. And then I'm going to talk briefly about each of the courses for the upcoming semester, one from Ben Woodard, one from Sam Forsyth, one from Magdalena Christoforska, and finally one from Richard Hames, all of which I'm incredibly excited about. I think this is going to be an amazing standout semester. So to talk about the program itself, its fundamental aim is to assess world making in all its forms. And so how does world making relate to history? How does world making relate to design? So to go to the first of those questions, what, after all, is history? History is the study of actions that mattered, and the prime way that actions matter, of course, is by shaping the world in which we live. So on one view, history is the sedimented record of the ways humans have made their world. And it is only by studying this, by coming to terms with the ways actions and decisions have mattered in the past, that we gain any grasp on how to intentionally design our world going forward. In other words, we need to study the history of world making in order to make our own worlds today in a reflective and willful manner, rather than unreflective ways that lead to people being open to being buffeted by disaster.
Georgiana, I think the video got muted. You have to unmute yourself, I think.
Age of unprecedented
Yeah,
challenges,
thank
such
you.
as, of course, artificial intelligence or the dawning of the Anthropocene. Our era is one which, if nothing else, demands new forms of collective world making. So to move on to the aforementioned courses, in the upcoming semester. First is Ben Woodard's, the second part of his ongoing masterclass, basically, in the history of biology and the life sciences. So the title is 200 Years of Life, Part 2. And just to briefly go over the description, in this seminar, Ben will be tracking the history, politics, and philosophy of biology over the last 200 years. Being that period in which it is cohered as a scientific discipline since the early 1800s. The aim is broadly to break out of two critical dead ends in interpreting biology. So on the one hand, the political and historical limitations of analytic treatments of biology, and on the other, the disregard for biological history and scientific detail in continental philosophical discourses around the life sciences. And so, whereas the first half of this ongoing seminar focused on the earlier period in question, this is now going to focus on the latter, that being the latter half of the 20th century. And it will look at how technical expertise and experimental praxis have been marshaled both for and against a value-neutral articulation of biology. So Ben will be looking at how this false neutrality, especially pervasive following the end of the Cold War, has allowed the political center to shift to the right, resuscitating historically naive and dangerous discussions of eugenics, race, IQ, and human experimentation. And so, as Ben's also going to explore, this strain of thought is opposed at times at the cost of oversimplification to both post-genomic understandings of evolutionary history and a too eager valorization of organismic agency or teleology. This is going to be brilliant. Ben is an absolute master at what he does, and his knowledge of the history of the life sciences is unparalleled, in my opinion. So this is going to be a good one. So to move on to the second course from Sam Forsyth, the title is Abducting the Future, Strategic Thought and the Logic of Military and Political Inquiry. And so in this seminar, Sam is going to look at the logic of inquiry in the history of strategic thought, exploring in particular the role of abductive inference and anticipatory practices in key discourses of strategic rationality, with the aim ultimately of elucidating their significance for military political logics of the present. So Sam is going to take us through ancient warfare and Renaissance statecraft, all the way to modern strategy and global intelligence, looking at how throughout history, a key aim of those engaged in political conflict has been to detect, anticipate, and shape future events by inferring possibilities, designing plans, and pursuing actions despite overriding danger, chanciness, and uncertainty. And so at the higher level, Sam is going to be thinking through the ways in which, whilst in classical strategic thinking, the future was something given by fate or fortune, capable of being shaped only by the most skillful and cunning heroes, that has now changed such that in modern strategy, the future has increasingly become something that must be predicted, preempted, and thus controlled through rational inquiry and systematic action. So that is to say, today wars and conflicts are not fought for the present, but play out also in a hypothetical future as long-range strategic plans, speculative military theories, or conjectural forecasts of intelligence. And finally, Sam is adopting a pragmatist perspective based on the criminally underrated philosophical work of Charles Sanders Peirce. And across the 4 sessions, he's going to be using these Peircean tools to read both major and minor works from the history of strategic thought, finding new and critical ways to interpret and read texts on ancient Greek and Chinese warfare, on early modern statecraft, Napoleonic and industrial military strategy, all the way through to contemporary military futurology. Nothing if not panoptic. I'm really excited for this one. It's going to be great. And so to move on to the third of the seminars in the upcoming semester, this one's from the brilliant Magdalena Krzysztoforska, and the title is From Inference to Intervention on the Operative Logics of Machine Learning. And so Magdalena is going to be looking at how in recent decades, machine learning methods have become deeply entangled with processes of world making through their crucial role in making inferences about the world. When deployed in contexts such as criminal justice, social welfare, or public health, these predictive systems take an even more active role in shaping the world by directly feeding data-driven insights into decision-making processes. And so Magdalena's contention is that in such high-stake contexts, patterns generalized from observed data are rendered actionable, often embedding and exasperating historical patterns of inequality and social harm. And so the contention motivating this seminar is that the project of remaking the world in a way that does not encode the past into the future in a perpetual feedback loop of discrimination requires an in-depth examination of the operative logics underlying some of the key machine learning methods operationalized in the affirmation and high-stakes contexts. And so to flesh out that contention, that we must remake the world, and that requires understanding these operative logics currently remaking it. Magdalena is going to be taking us through a journey through various approaches to machine learning logic through different conceptual lenses, drawing on theoretical frameworks for thinking about systems of classification, the material theory of induction, theories of explanatory and idealized models in science, and interventionist theories of causation. So looking at thinkers ranging from Susan Lee Starr to Elisa Bokolich, and William C. Wimsatt, and Judea Pearl and James Woodward for some other examples. This course is going to be absolutely fantastic. Do not miss it. Magdalena is fantastic. Really couldn't recommend this one enough. This is going to be a brilliant seminar, so please consider signing up for it. You won't regret it. Okay, and so finally, a seminar from Richard Hames, the brilliant Richard Hames, and the title is Critical Collapsology, Theory and the Ends of Worlds. This one's going to be fantastic as well. So Richard is going to be looking at how collapsology has been one of the most strikingly underthought areas of the social sciences. And so he's going to be looking at how the field has been conceptually surrounded by the problem of the indeterminate totality, as well as the hackneyed quality of invocations of the apocalypse, and how this has led to the practice of studying social disintegration remaining wallowing in a fragmentary and ad hoc position. However, despite that, we need new critical, we of course need new critical, in an era of collapses, we need new critical approaches to this canon and its implications. As Richard contests, as we are participants in a society whose future is highly uncertain and whose historical condition of possibility was itself the destruction of other societies. So Richard's contention being that it's incumbent upon us to really get to grips with the fragmented, albeit fragmented, canon on critical collapsology. And so he's going to be asking questions such as what do we owe future societies when we consider the prospect of collapse? What do we owe past societies? And through asking these questions, Rich is going to explore the field of collapsology and what it means for us. And these won't be taken as two separate questions, but as a single unified field of concern. So again, the overarching question that Richard's going to be posing and discussing is, can we embed what it means for us into accounts of how collapse actually works, integrating the normative and the descriptive layers of theory? So to briefly go into a bit more detail, Richard again is arguing that the careful consideration of collapse is of special importance to anyone who wishes to work with projects that operate over spans of time that exceed a few decades. Anyone with a radical political project, therefore, must contend with the possibility of a rapid period of transformation that makes their project not only operationally challenging, but potentially conceptually incoherent. Yet noticing this possibility of our own obsolescence, short of our outright extinction, also opens a rich philosophical terrain. And this is what Richard's going to be exploring. Again, asking such questions as, what does it mean to have values that are once historically contingent, but also claim their universality to be unrealized? What kind of medium is history itself, and how does it resist us? And it's these kind of questions that are once densely theoretical and eminently practical, demanding, as Richard's going to show, analyses of key questions in ethics and meta-ethics. Not only that, also the challenges of designing new institutions are going to be covered, institutions that might carry forward revised goals, or at least encase them sufficiently so they can be transported with fidelity to our descendants. So again, this is going to be such a rich a rich course, and I think is going to be a resource for the field moving forwards. Rich is doing some really key foundational work in, as he points out, the previously fragmented and splintered world of collapsology. So again, for courses that promise to be truly brilliant, and please, I implore you all, consider signing up to every single one of them. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming semester.
Great. Okay, give me 1 second. So like I said, if you have any questions, obviously Thomas is not here with us today. Feel free to address them in the chat or in the YouTube comments, or feel also free to reach us in any other way. Let's move on to Cécile Malaspina, our programmer for art and curatorial practice. And I'm very honored and glad to introduce her. She's a visiting fellow at King's College London, author of An Epistemology of Noise, and the principal translator of Gilbert Simondon's work, namely On the Mode of Existence of Technical Objects with John Rogoff. Before turning to philosophy, she trained as an artist, art historian, and curator. Her main interest lies in the normativity of concepts, especially with regards to the aesthetic and ethical implications of conceptualizing contingency and uncertainty. And Cécile, I will hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. And before I start, I want to say something about this anniversary and mention Mo Salami, who is one of the co-founders and who was the one who first contacted me and invited me to become one of the programmers here. And what an honor it was for me to join this illustrious team of thinkers and philosophers There's a strong philosophy connection between all of us here, but philosophy on a very inter and transdisciplinary edge. So it's a very exciting community to be part of. So I just want to highlight this work that Mo has done and how exciting it is to have such a milestone together. And the other thing I always say every year, and I mean it more every year, is just how amazing the student community is. I learn so much from the students, from working with the students, and it's just probably more fun than work should feel like, working with such accomplished thinkers from so many different backgrounds, from so many different places in the world too. And yeah, that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing about the art and curatorial program, there's a few things that are perhaps different from other art and curatorial programs, because it's not so much about art and curatorial practice as it is about the things that artists and curators think about. So students enrolled are on the whole, I would say, artists, curators, publishers, editors, and writers who have skin in the game of art. Sometimes they have already established professional practices, and some people just start out as undergraduate students. And then there's a mixture of both, people who have professional backgrounds, even as particle physicists, and who start out in an art career. So an incredibly vibrant mix of backgrounds and levels of, I would say, of expertise that really makes for very enriching dialogues and discussions. So now a few words about the content and approach of the program. Studying in the Art and Curatorial Practice program means that students and researchers engage with ongoing technological innovations and think about the impact of these innovations on the meaning and practice of art in the 21st century. The program has a strong interest in philosophy and crossover with the other programs, but not necessarily in the philosophy of art, but rather in philosophy that is relevant to artists and theorists who engage, loosely speaking, with all the arts. So that includes a lot of designers, architects, but really also people from non-arts backgrounds. I think we've got quite a big tent. It fosters conceptual rigor. That is something that as an art student, I was reading about Foucault and the French epistemologists and Deleuze, and really getting quite a superficial grab of a lot of concepts and theories and just being hungry for more. So I guess having conjoined these two backgrounds, this art and curatorial practice program seeks to crystallize more sharpness and rigor in the concepts and theories that circulate a lot in discourse around and in the arts. It focuses specifically on the relations between concepts, percept, and affect specific to creative practices, grounding the dialogue with other forms of practice and knowledge, notably those coming from the natural and human sciences. The program takes stock of the paradigm brought on by new media technologies, or paradigm shift rather, and the engineering of art and in art, but also cultivates a historical perspective. In doing this, the program explores methodologies that are not necessarily yet incorporated into art curricula and accredited universities and colleges. Part of this is also the seminars that are cross-listed between our different programs. As part of its practicum, the program includes the publication of research and student-curated events and exhibitions. So that's a really beautiful practice-based aspect of the program. Through the course of study, students meet and become part of a network of professional artists, critics, curators, and thinkers who are currently involved in the fields of art and curation, and develop, I think, a really valuable peer group. So I'm going to say a few words now about the 3 seminars that we have upcoming. The first is a 1-credit seminar, for which I'm very excited to say that we got Pablo Larios. who is a distinguished author and art critic based in Berlin. He's known to many of you already as the editor-at-large of the Documenta 15. He has contributed to important publications such as Art Forum, Art Papers, Frieze, where he has served as senior editor, and Kaleidoscope, Moose, Spike, Art Quarterly, Texte zur Kunst, and many others. He's also an accomplished writer of fiction, poetry plays, and also has a practice as a filmmaker. So that's just a few words about Pablo, who, for those of you who don't know him. He is going to be doing a seminar stroke workshop on art writing, a discipline that has emerged in recent years to encompass the many ways that art is mediated by text, overlapping with but not limited to art criticism and academic art history. The purpose of his workshop is to provide a general orientation on art writing while encouraging students to think about verbal and textual expression in relation to their own and others' works. Regardless of one's own role in curatorial fields, writing about art, he says, can often seem daunting. How to sum up a lifelong practice in a few words, how to describe complex visual or conceptual notions in plain terms, how does art writing shift with respect to different contexts, languages, and geographies, and with respect to established ways of writing about art. So in this and many other ways, his seminar offers an orientation covering a lot of aspects of art writing in a series of different contexts, from reporting and criticism, for example, in magazines, journals, and newspapers, to professional communication in websites, press releases, brochures, and including grant applications and proposals, up through artists' writings and writing as an artistic practice in general. Students who join his seminar will read and discuss touchstones of art writing, but they will also develop their own critical writing through weekly exercises. He'll give particular emphasis to general writing principles and the situated forms that art writing takes in professional practice. So this is going to be amazing, and I think it's a unique opportunity to have someone like Pablo introduce you to this practice. The other two seminars are 2-credit seminars. So Pablo's is a 1-credit seminar, that's 4 sessions. The next one is a seminar session, 8 sessions, 2 credits on Gilbert Simondon. There's still a lot of hunger to engage with Simondon, and there's still amazing works a lot that still need to be translated, but really quite important ones that have recently come out in English mostly, but also in other languages. So a lot of people want to really get to grips with this encyclopedic, wild, speculative thinker. I think this he's not an easy thinker to get an overall idea of. So this seminar hopes to remedy this by looking at his work, Imagination and Invention. This has only recently been published in a translation by Joe Hughes and Christophe Wall-Romana. It's a tremendous book, and I think also a very good introduction to Simondon's work. First of all, it's shorter. It was written after his 2 main theses, the mode of existence of technical objects, and the other one is Individuation in light of the notions of form and of potential and form, which was translated by Taylor Atkins. And these 2 main theses are both of them, I think, quite a tour de force for a lot of philosophers and non-philosophers to wrap their heads around. So Imagination and Invention has a kind of synthetic effect because it takes a lot of what is acquired in the 2 main theses and focuses it on the problem of imagination and invention. It's a special privilege for me to welcome 2 distinguished Simondon commentators or writers to speak as guest speakers in this seminar. Andrea Zoppis will do one of the sessions, and Andrea Bardin will be doing another session. Zoppi's session will provide an, I think, invaluable philosophical context by situating Simondon's work on the imagination vis-à-vis two key contemporaries of Simondon, namely Michael Dufresne and François Lyotard. So I'm definitely going to be listening very carefully to that one. I've also heard him speak in the past. In fact, this is why I invited him, and he's a very sparkling, precise, creative thinker. Andrea Bardin is someone who has established himself very much as an authority on Simondon, on epistemology and philosophy, political theory in relation to Simondon. So he's really someone great to have intervening in this seminar too. He will be contributing a critical comparison of Simondon's book with the almost homonymous lecture at the Sorbonne given in 1962 to 1963 on the imagination by Juliette Favez-Boutonnier. So this is something that I think not many people will know. And in fact, I don't know very much about this connection, but it's going to give really tremendously valuable historical background to reading this beautiful book. The seminar will also delve into Simondon's concept of the image object, emphasizing its multifaceted role in synthesizing contemporary realities and social norms. We'll discuss the dual nature of images with Simondon as both mental constructs and tangible artifacts, their significance in memory and foresight, and their influence on decision-making and cultural expression. Analyzing Simondon's approach will help us think about the proliferation and mediation of images in our own historical context, producing a novel perspective on how the imagination drives invention and shapes human experience. The seminar aims to provide a comprehensive overview and also a deep reading of Simondon's book and a refined understanding of what Simondon took to be the vital role both of the imagination and the invention in various domains of life, human and non-human. The close reading will also position Simondon's ideas with respect to other philosophical theories and enable us to reflect together on their ethical and practical implications for media theory today and psychology. This is a book that was written for psychology students. Students will actively engage in discussions, presentations, and produce a final written, visual, or sound assignment that will allow them to hone their critical thinking and communication skills. I'm also available to meet for people who want to discuss their writing before they submit it. So this has been quite productive in the last seminars. They will be encouraged to extrapolate from Simondon's insights and think about the mediating role of images today and about contemporary issues relevant to the arts, but also to recent developments in the theory of evolution and cognitive processes and synthetic intelligence. Simondon's concept of plurifunctionality of images notably offers an original angle on current inquiries into neural activity and cognitive developments in living beings, but also in relation to what the consensus seems to call artificial intelligence and the widely accepted analogy between AI and human image processing and imaginative capabilities. You can probably tell from the way I introduced this that I'm not ready to call it intelligence yet. Artificial intelligence, I mean, but I also think, anyway, we'll be discussing this. It's going to be fun. By integrating Simondon's philosophical insights with contemporary techno-aesthetic and techno-scientific theories, the seminar will foster original thinking about the imagination, cognition, and technological innovation today. We'll look at key topics like the role of the image as mediator, plurifunctionality of the image object, integration of contemporary realities and social norms, phenomenological analysis of images, the role of memory, anticipation, and decision-making, cultural and expressive significance of images, and many other key topics. This brings me now to introduce the last seminar, which I will be running as well. It's the third iteration of Variations on the Great Refusal. It's a seminar that's very close to my heart, not only because I came across this concept of the Great Refusal by encountering the work of Alfred North Whitehead, also not the easiest philosopher to wrap your head around, but an exhilarating speculative realist for our times. So his idea of the negative is something that is quite mind-bending, and that forms, if you like, the backbone to what will be a seminar that is about thinking and creative practices in times of crisis. The reason why this is so is that Whitehead's speculative, realistic approach and his concept of negation was picked up by Herbert Marcuse in his Eros and Civilization. And not only this, the discovery I made while looking into this is that there is a very significant historical precedent to the idea of the Great Refusal, which comes from Dante Alighieri and the Divine Comedy, and notably his Antechamber to Hell. So some history on the idea of the Great Refusal. But before I start with this, perhaps I want to say that because I intend for this to be a series of which we will have several iterations, each time carefully trying to break a taboo and think about hotspots of crisis of our time, and use the idea of the Great Refusal as a lens to approach these intelligently, ideally without loss of complexity. So the topic will be that will be in the background of thinking about the Great Refusal, and will be the Israel-Palestine conflict. So before I say more about this and about the nature of the guest speakers that will be participating, I want to say something about the history of the idea of the Great Refusal. Dante Alighieri first introduces the idea of the refusal into the Western literary canon in his Divine Comedy, published in 1321, where he talks about the shade or the shadow or the soul that he encounters in the antechamber to hell, the shade who commits the Great Refusal. And this is an emblematic figure representing those who are eternally in the antechamber of hell in pursuit of the banner of conformity. Whitehead famously revives the notion of the Great Refusal as the mark of intellectual cowardice, namely as the refusal to grant reason the exercise of its full rights. However, he also defines the Great Refusal as its opposite, namely the hallmark of aesthetic achievement. And it's all about this pivoting of what the refusal is, because as Dante himself, for example, uses the idea of the refusal to describe the shade of the one who commits the Great Refusal, basically someone who remains anonymous, who is remembered for no great deed, but who is infamous for not having stepped up to what the historical moment asked of him. And yet at the same time, Dante is also the one who himself experiences this cowardice, but refuses to bow to his own trepidations and goes ahead while in exile and really very much in danger also, and writes his Divine Comedy, basically putting all the great and powerful of his time in hell. So this is a very courageous text by Dante, and it starts with this idea of the Great Refusal as something that pivots between cowardice and intellectual courage. So it's in this second sense of intellectual courage that Whitehead talks about the aesthetic achievement that the Great Refusal, if you like, performs. And it's in this sense that the idea of the Great Refusal has entered the vocabulary of 20th century emancipatory movements via Herbert Marcuse's Eros and Civilization. Dante's Great Refusal has thus ultimately become the legacy of an exiled poet's intellectual and aesthetic courage, namely his refusal to be cowed by self-doubt and his courage to place the rank and file of his powerful contemporaries in hell. So the first variations on the Great Refusal seminar situated this notion of the speculative aesthetics of Alfred North Whitehead and Herbert Marcuse's Eros in Civilization. This now is going to be the third iteration of the Great Refusal seminar, and it proposes the idea of the Great Refusal as a lens through which to think about the nature of aesthetic achievement in contemporary art practices and the ethical commitment of intellectuals in times of crisis. Invited speakers will therefore chart their own trajectory in navigating the Great Refusal in the context of the highly fraught public discourse about Israel and Palestine. In this seminar, we will hear from those who have entered the fray of a highly polarized public discourse through a courageous act of refusal, a refusal of censorship and a refusal of injunctions against the exercise by reason of its full rights. Outstanding contemporary artists, filmmakers, and curators will be invited to reflect on the idea of aesthetic achievement, not as an other to reason, but rather as requiring the intellectual courage to grant reason the exercise of its full rights. The seminar allows us to tune into the intellectual sensitivities that we inherit from these thinkers, Dante, Whitehead, Marcuse, but it won't be about Dante and Whitehead, Marcuse. We will take abreast the problematic nature of inner conflicts, so this pivoting of the refusal between cowardice and courage, namely undecidability, self-deliberation, and the deliberation with others. To look at contemporary art through this prism allows us to regain the means of complexity and also strategies, practices, and concepts that can encounter something like the mental state of noise, something that I've written about in the past, a concept that was developed in psychiatry by John Ratey and Stephen Sands, and also ideas such as social dissonance that have been developed by the philosopher and artist Matin, who is known to many of you. So the idea of this, of these iterations of the Great Refusal seminar is to contribute to the development of a much needed self-defense kit, a conceptual self-defense kit against the compulsive flight into meaning that, in the words of the psychologist Leon Festinger, corresponds to a, I quote, defensive searching for a name or cognitive label whose purpose is to alleviate the cognitive dissonance that is provoked by jarring beliefs and actions. So I hope you are excited about this and hope to see you there.
Oh, thank you so much, Cécile. This is, as always, an extraordinary lineup of seminars, and as always, extremely relevant and brave. And with thank you also for summoning such an array of guests from an array of disciplines. And yes, I totally recommend everyone to check the description of the seminars under this program. So thank you, Cécile, again. Our next stop is critical philosophy with our programmer Reza Negarestani. I will introduce him briefly. He's a philosopher who has contributed extensively to journals and anthologies and lectured at numerous international universities and institutes. His current philosophical project is focused on rationalist universalism, beginning with the evolution of the modern system of knowledge and advancing towards contemporary philosophies of rationalism, their procedures, as well as their demands for special forms of human conduct. He is the author of Cyclonopedia, Intelligence and Spirit, and the Abducting the Outside collected writings from 2003 to 2018. Over to you, Reza.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, everyone. Hello, colleagues. Hello, everyone. It is great to have the 10th anniversary of the new center finally together as colleagues, as friends, and as students. Magnificent. Thank you, everyone, for all the great work. So, this semester, obviously, precisely because it's 10th anniversary, and it should have a little bit of fireworks in the sky, as is often the case. We have decided collectively at the new center to turn the critical program of philosophy, either by accident or by coincidence or by other sort of means, truly what philosophy is supposed to be. Philosophy is nothing but an organon of history making. If it is not, if philosophy is not into the business of history making, it is not worth its name. Simple as that, as everyone knows that. And so we have lined up great lectures and by some of the best, most brilliant philosophers of our time, and particularly people who have been sensitive, extremely sensitive to the unfolding events since past year, if not since past October. And hence, we have, first of all, two seminars, which are essentially continuations of what has been talked about since the beginning of the year, with the events unfolding, but now taking a different turn, perhaps a little bit more radicalized philosophically, if not truly in a spirit intellectually. And some highly innovative, magnificent, I would say, courses taught by, I would say, people I am proud, truly proud, to ever taught them. And, you know, as always, Thomas Moynihan is not amongst us right now, but as Thomas Moynihan always knows and always says, the child is a true parent. And I would say that my students are my true parents. So, the first seminar would be Timely Thoughts on War and Death, taught by Franziska Einer and Austin Gross. This is in continuation of their previous seminar, Lethe, Forgetfulness and Concealment. Whereas previously, in the past seminar, they have started to inquire about certain sorts of what one can say the deep philosophical questions about death and forgetting, hence the problem of Lethe as we know it, the problem of the underworld. With regard to the canon of Freud and other commentators at the beginning of the 20th century, now this seminar takes it to a different, completely different level, the engagement with Freud. So whereas the first seminar mostly pertained to Freud, the Great War, World War I, the Day of Judgment, and so on and so forth. Now, for obvious reasons that I do not need to reveal at this point, because they are very clear, and they have decided to address a different phase of Freud's engagement with death, which would be his experience of the rise of Nazi Germany and the economic meltdown that follows from it, and so on and so forth. Meaning a world in Europe to which now a lot of people are beholden. So I cannot express how excited I am for this politically conscious decision by Francisca and Austin to teach this course when it should needed to be taught. And philosophical seminars should always be context sensitive in response to the historical and life-threatening crises which are basically undergoing. So the next one would be someone that I generally think is among the most brilliant people I've ever seen. And I think of myself as a lucky person to ever manage to be a friend and at some point a teacher to him, Carl Olsen. The topic, humorously, and one needs to understand Carl's twisted humor as a geographer, is the geographers that ate themselves. Obviously, the title itself points out to a very arcane problem. The problem of autophagia, eating yourself, precisely because you cannot tell the difference between yourself and the surrounding space. It is quite well-known biological phenomenon since the beginning of the time of evolution. The problem that sets forth, what you might say, the impulse or the intellectual resistance toward not eating myself, which is the problem of geography, the speculative philosophy of space. And I would say that Carl is truly a great thinker when it comes to such topic. So Carl is going to talk about, obviously, Roger Caillois, the problems of biology of the sort that are being, laid out in theoretical biology, in mathematics and modeling today, thinking about space and why is that space is such a highly uncanny problem for philosophy itself. Not just only for philosophy, it is actually a problem for any sort of theory and practice that we might ever consider. Politics. Hobbes was one of the first people who thought about the problem of space. What does it look like when the state cannot tell difference between its own identity and the space surrounding it? Well, according to Hobbes, people start to self-cannibalize. Problem of autophagia, right? what happens with an organism, what happens in this sort of realm, that sort of realm, when the problem of space becomes a very thorny problem. And then, obviously, as a highly philosophical, intellectual experts in geography, Carl is going to bring this into a fuller story about about enlightenment, the legacy of enlightenment. That maybe it is the case that in certain sort of ways of how enlightenment has been formulated, enlightenment is nothing but a defense mechanism to hold a space at bay, philosophically and politically understood. Then we have a course by Kirsten Fuchs. And this is essentially a course on feminism, which I absolutely highly recommend it, knowing that this is going to be fully detailed, fully involved in terms of various lines of looking at the question of feminism, which, according to Kirsten, and the description of the course, which is Feminism in the Canon of Philosophy, is this whole idea that feminism is not a second-hand philosophy. It is literally philosophy being reckoned with its own other, right? It's a project of philosophy that since I would say, at the very least, at least according to the description, since the Greek philosophy, this project has been delayed because obviously the birth of the Greek philosophy in the name under the aegis of polis, of city, would exclude some other people to talk as philosophers, right? And who are the first people who have been silenced, colonized? Well, according to, at very least, a number of commentators, such as Abdullah Öcalan, women are the first colonized when it comes to the history of civilization. And thus, if there is truly a philosophy worth of its name, it should start literally with understanding of what it means to actually include the other, the first colonized. So this, I am pretty sure, would be a fundamentally intriguing course. Then we have, my apologies. Then we have Jean-Pierre Caron's cognitive mapping, Althusser, Sellars, and Genetti. I think the best way to go over and introduce the seminar is by reading a little bit from JP's description of the course. He says, in Grundrisse, Marx comments on his method for the critique of political economy. In Marx, quote, the population is an abstraction if I leave out, for example, the classes of which it is composed, these classes, in turn, are an empty phrase if I'm not familiar with the elements on which they rest. For example, wage labor, capital, etc. Culminating in the seminal formula, the concrete is concrete because it is concentration of many determinations, hence unity of the diverse. So thus, according to Althusser, fashioning concepts that are adequate to their objects is a domain of proper science, which is understood as the business of theoretical practice, amounting to 1, the elaboration of a set of generalities, 2, through the mobilization of the resources of generalities, and 3, out of previous accepted sets of ideological generalities. The processual character of the constitution of Althusserian science is similar to how Wilfred Sellars engages with the development of science, while the successive images of man in the world are constituted out of our linguistic resources. So what Jean-Pierre is going to do in this course would be rediscovering the meaning of concrete in the pure political philosophical sense through 1, Althusser critique of ideology, namely imaginary relations of some sort, and 2, through Sellars, the space of reasons and norms versus the space of causes. And of course, these spaces have so many commonalities. It's not as if it's a black and white sort of thing, but nevertheless, this would be on the side of understanding the role of language in the forging of the concrete, because we are linguistic people, we are agents. We are agents insofar as we use language to justify, to hold ourselves accountable, and essentially to essentially accept a certain sort of responsibility. This responsibility is not moral, but nevertheless is normative at the end, precisely because it's intersubjective. It's intersubjective because it's being channeled through language. So Jean-Pierre is going to work on these 2 fronts, and the missing link here would be the late works of Jose Arthur Jionetti, where basically Jionetti is being criticized for moving from a very Marxian position to a very Wittgensteinian position. And hence, to some people, it seems like a capitulation of some sort, turn to a political quietism, except it is not. And that's exactly what Jean-Pierre is going to talk about, that this later work of Jionetti is the missing link, in the precise sense that Wittgenstein's puts concrete limits on the ambitions of language, just like Marx and Althusser put limits, concrete, constrained limits, positive or negative, on the idea of labor, political action, so on and so forth. And lastly, I will be teaching a course 2-credit course, 8 session, titled Catechism for a Revolutionary Philosophical Human Being. This is another course that I mentioned, which is a continuation of the courses that we have been teaching, just like Francisca and this course on Lethe, and this is the continuation of the Draw of the Desert seminar. I would say that given the fact that we all become we have become in one way or another very political past few months, if not year, I think it's quite reasonable, I would say, to give a seminar which is political explicitly, but is still holding its own philosophical dignity. I am unfortunately not a theologian. I am not a man of religion, really. I'm a philosopher at heart. So I would like to address in this seminar one of the most problems that I have witnessed, and that would be the crisis of leadership in the contemporary world, and how this crisis of leadership might unfold. Well, do you want AI God messianism, or do you want global caliphate, or do you want full capitalism? What do you want, really? Because anytime that you can't really coherently think about the problem of leadership for us as human beings, obviously there would be a failed project and a lot of pain. Obviously, to address such a question, such a problem, namely the crisis of leadership, I cannot begin without genuinely and authentically start from the concrete particularity of my own situation, namely as an Iranian, as a Shia philosopher, and after all, a child of what Michel Foucault and some other people have called the most uncommon revolution in 20th century, if not, by all definitions, the last major revolution on the planet, the Iranian Revolution, 1979. So I want to literally start from the concrete particularity of what really happened. What was the matrix of power, leadership, revolutionary thoughts, philosophical and political changes that led to a great event such as this, and how such a great event such as this took highly unanticipated twists. And of course, as I said, here in philosophy program, we are not into the business of reading philosophy, but to make history of philosophy. Love you all.
Thank you, Reza. Wow. Thank you for also launching these fireworks, anniversary fireworks, but not only that, for presiding over such a feast of philosophical fire, fiery labor, or the labor of fire, which is philosophy.
The labor of the inhuman.
Yes. So maybe it's like the fireworks in its more literal sense.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Now we can finally move on to our last programmer, which is Jason Mohaghegh. who is the leader of the transdisciplinary studies. And he's a philosopher, a literary theorist, and a professor of comparative literature at Babson College. His work tracks currents of experimental thought across the so-called East and the West, with particular attention to concepts of chaos, violence, illusion, silence, extremism, mania, disappearance, night, evil, secrecy, and apocalyptic writing. He has published 9 books to date, including 2 volumes titled Omnicide 1 and 2 on madness, and 2 volumes on Night titled Night, a Philosophy of the After Dark, and Night 2, Philosophy of the Last World. He is also the founding director of the Future Studies program and co-editor of the Futures Theory and Suspensions book series for Bloomsbury Press. So please, Jason, can you tell us more about the program and the seminars for this season? Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, we all have different interpretations of the resonance of what it means to be standing at the decade threshold of the anniversary of the New Center. I would note an ominous sort of coincidence, meaningful coincidence or synchronicity across time, that the Surrealist movement and the first Surrealist manifesto was in 1924. So this is the 100-year anniversary of Surrealism as well, the official inauguration of that. And I only bring that up because in some ways, I think that of the New Center as the avant-garde of our generation. And I think that it's inhabited the void of the fall and the collapse of what was a beautiful moment in time, the explosive rise and fall of the avant-garde 100 years ago. And I think of us as an avant-garde. And of course, this is a very debated and controversial minefield of what is an avant-garde and has it sort of become an archetypal cliche? Not for me, because I know of the blood and the effort and the ingenuity of the first men and women who started those movements and who fought for them, and many of whom died for them. And I think in terms of the mortal existential wager that we're all doing, the time that my colleagues, Cécile, Reza, Thomas, Mohamed, above all others, have put into this, no, I honor them that it's the same intensity. And so we are an avant-garde in the sense of always seeking cutting-edge content. Every semester is an attempt to try a new trick up our sleeves, explore new territories. That's avant-garde. In terms of the visionary methods that we try out, I mean, we're all over the place in experimenting in sort of the laboratory and the workshop of possible approaches. The intimacy of the alliances that we form, which you don't find in social or academic circles. You know, the people I've met in the New Center are of a different kind of intimacy than elsewhere, and so those alliances are quite precious and very much like the avant-garde, which formed brotherhoods and sisterhoods that were unparalleled. The fact that we have global ambitions in a time of immense political unrest and catastrophe. 100 years ago, Reza alluded to the world stage and the geopolitical order of 1924, the world wars, and we find ourselves in times of global disaster as well, ecologically, technologically, politically, on every front. And finally, the perspective of ourselves as a kind of guerrilla warfare agency, in only the sense that, not in sense of a violent terminology, but in a sense of being very much opposed to certain structures of reality itself. You see, the avant-garde, above all else, they didn't declare just political sort of challenge to the world. It was deeply existential, and they went after the domain of appearances, the domain of representation, the domain of thought, the domain of images and objects and ideas, knowing that that is where we truly get enslaved and initiated and conditioned into lifeless and disenchanting modes of existence. And so I see ourselves as keeping that legacy alive. 100 years since the Surrealist Manifesto, we are every semester writing our own manifestos. And so I thank everyone for being a part of that. And so to keep that thematic going, then what I'd like to just share are the 3 seminars that are happening in transdisciplinary studies. I, as a small gift to the new center, wanted then to, in the honor of the avant-garde, bring probably the 2 best scholars and thinkers on the avant-garde, the original avant-garde that I've ever met. So first, to your left, we have Stuart Kendall, who many of you would hopefully know because he probably graces all your bookshelves. If you have any books by George Bataille, then you have Stuart Kendall's name in close proximity. He is the editor and translator of 7 of George Bataille's books. And to my mind, the 3 of them, which I've had for years, always very close to me, Inner Experience, On Nietzsche, and Guilty. That trilogy of highly existentially charged and complex writing by Bataille, those are translated by and edited by Stuart. He's a writer and editor, a translator of the intersections of philosophy, poetics, media, and design. And what he's doing for us, though, and he's taught all around the world. He's taught at Stanford, at Boston University, at SUNY Stony Brook, Cal Arts, a lot of places. But what he's doing for us is something he's never done anywhere else. You see, he's just collaborated on a book for the first time, the translation of Antonin Artaud's writings from his journey to Mexico, which is one of the most stunning and bizarre texts that anyone could ever encounter. And he's put an entire 4-week seminar together for us to explore the outer limits of Artaud. For those who may not know, Antonin Artaud, one of the great mad geniuses of all time, one of the most sort of beautiful and terrifying figments of the imagination of thought, great schizophrenic writer of the 20th century, wrote most of his work from insane asylums. And during one of the few spans of time when he was allowed liberation from electroshock therapy and all the kind of cruel sadism of psychotherapy that was happening in the insane asylum where he lived, Artaud was able to take a trip to Mexico. And he said he wanted to escape European civilization. And what he found out in the outer reaches of Mexico, it's not what you would think. It's not exoticism. It's not sort of a privileged sense. It's sort of a portal to an otherworldly experience. So Stuart Kendall, for our purposes, has devised 4 weeks. The first session on what Artaud went to Mexico to do. These are his own titles. Second session is on surrealist religion and revolution. And that really gets into Artaud's mysticism, but also his political aspirations, his unique concept of the political, a kind of grand politics of the revolutionary. Session 3 on Mexico and its doubles. For those who know Artaud's work on the theater and its double, he was in brilliant ways intrigued by ideas of that. And he looks at what he calls, quote, the eternal culture of Mexico and the occult forces of Mexico in those writings. And then culminating with week 4, the peyote dance, which is Artaud's immersion in certain drug states, certain indigenous rituals, and visionary experiences that only complemented his already beautiful lunacies that he had been attempting for decades back in France. So you get to go on a journey to Mexico with Antonin Artaud and with one of the greatest scholars of Artaud's work in Stuart Kendall. Now, the individual who he collaborated on with the book, the translator of it, actually, Stuart edited this particular volume, though he's a phenomenal translator himself of Bataille, is Rainer Hansche, the second faculty member who's here. So there's a kind of conspiracy here between the two. And I wanted to bring Rainer into the folds of the new center. It's been a long time that I wanted to kind of announce his inclusion, because Rainer is I want to take a moment to truly give credit where credit is due, as all of you have, being very generous towards your allies. Rainer has single-handedly for over a decade run what is for me one of the most unbelievable, astonishing publishing houses in the history of the world. It's called Contramundum. Right? You can look it up, www.contramundumpress.com. It is absolutely, just again, bewildering, the immense exertion and the humility and the ambition at the same time of Rainer in being a one-person show, manifesting these texts, these catalogs of writers who have often gone lost and missing in time, writers who were anonymous, writers or amazing writers who had certain unpublished or untranslated works. And he does the really grueling, excruciating task of sitting up all night long and translating works by some figures that you would know very well, figures like Baudelaire, figures like Rimbaud, figures like Pessoa, Fernando Pessoa, the great Portuguese writer, but works of theirs that are almost unknown in their own languages and had never been translated for good or for bad into the global language of English. So Rainer is the editor and founder of Contramundum Press, and also a great thinker and writer in his own right. He's a novelist. He's written a series of novels. He's also written philosophical works. He's published in many places. You can look him up and see his great works, The Acolyte being one of them. That's just a beautifully written text. But Rainer is a very powerful thinker, and what he wants to do is to take us into the notion of alien and illogical powers, which for those who don't know is a reference to Nietzsche. Nietzsche referred to a type of thinking or a type of imagination that is beyond the conscious and the unconscious, that's beyond rationality and the irrational. He called them alien powers, the powers of creative imagination, he then clarifies. And Rainer takes this very seriously, not as just some elegant kind of poetic notion of imagination, but really an access point and a control room into other undergrounds or chambers of human consciousness, human cognition. So for the entire seminar, he wants to look at the imagination, he wants to look at intuition, he wants to look at premonitions, he wants to look at the subconscious and the unconscious, but then he wants to replace it with a more powerful terminology, which many of you probably have not been exposed to, a kind of subcurrent of existentialist thought called incubation. So the 4 weeks of his class on alien and illogical powers, incubation and other oneric forces, and this is spiral 1. By the way, he has a spiral 2 already constructed for the new center for another semester. But session 1 is called Imagination and Incubation, Illicit Forms of Knowledge. Session 2 is on the impersonal, the alien, and the elemental. Session 3 is on otherness and the inhuman. And session 4 is an experiment and inquiry session, venturing elsewhere. And that's a fill in the blank that's going to happen later. So I'm very honored to have this 1-2 punch of Stuart Kendall and Rainer Hansche from Contramundum Press, looking at really writers from the avant-garde that have become too overlooked. It's time to revisit them. They are our brothers and sisters. They are our elders and our ancestors, for good or for bad. And we come from a lot of their bad blood. And I'm not just speaking of the European avant-garde. Remember, there were avant-gardes all around the globe, in Eastern Europe, in Africa, in Tokyo, in Istanbul, in Cairo, in Mexico City. And so retracing a little bit of that spirit and resurrecting those ghosts will help us remember perhaps what we're capable of at the new center and what we've been doing all along. Remember Nietzsche's famous line that the job is to become what we already are. So the third and final seminar that's happening in transdisciplinary studies is my own on fear. I took this Raphael, who really is the Wizard of Oz, a kind of puppet master behind the scenes of the new center. He's asked me to teach this for a while. I floated it to him maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but always danced around teaching it. Didn't feel like the right time. Now maybe it's time to really get into the stomach of the question of fear. And this will be divided, this seminar that I want to run will be divided into, we'll explore the universal categories of phobia that everybody knows, the most common fears, fears of heights, needles, insects, confined spaces, and their corresponding nightmares, dreams of falling, dreams of drowning, dreams of being chased. But I also really want to spend most of our time on typologies of fresh terror, singular forms of fear that are emerging in the wake of our contemporary era. I feel like there are these timeless primordial fears, but then there are also every age and every epocality can give rise to its own categories and classifications of dread, of horror, of terror, of paranoia. And God knows we are entering an age of extreme paranoia. And so the methodology that I actually want us to follow is that our primary sources for this seminar on fear is going to be conspiracy theories and the contemporary conspiracy theories that are in circulation in today's media and online. So we're going to look at, I've divided it into kind of 4 types of conspiracy theories. 1, the suspicion that things are not what they seem. 2, the suspicion that they are coming for us, whoever they are. 3, the suspicion that the danger is now within. And session 4, that the end is nearing. And this will take us into looks at the belief in secret societies, online demons, alien invasion, medical and technological manipulation, and doomsday scenarios that you find in media expressed. And we're going to look at the question about how the horizon of fear is transforming in an age of virtuality, holograms, and metaverses soon approaching. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I look forward to seeing you all there.
Thank you so much, Jason. And your seminars always work towards reminding us what we're capable of. So thank you also for honoring also this New Center anniversary by mentioning a similar avant-garde anniversary, and let's say the ancestors or the precursors of such endeavors. Right, so with that we conclude the presentations for our upcoming seminars. I think it would be useful, Rafael, now if you could tell us some about the ask questions for the applicant.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the programmers as always, for the presentations and for the work you put in them. I wanted to mention something. It's very funny to hear from. I was very happy when Jason decided to do the seminar on fear, because this has been one that like I've watched. My first New Center seminar was actually a Jason seminar, the Deception Theory, Movements of the Liar. I highly recommend everybody that had access to the archive to go there and watch it. And for those of you who don't have access to the archive, just go there, get access, and watch it, because it's an amazing one. And so I feel very happy to see this seminar going on, and I think it's going to be fantastic. And I'm going to briefly, of course, thanks everybody for also the very nice lineup that you have managed to secure and have been managing to secure time and time again. I'm going to briefly go over some frequently asked questions that people usually have been asking me through email or through other channels. And just so that everybody's on the same page with that, if you have any questions about the application process, I'm going to put an email on the comment section that I am the one responding to them at studentservices@thenewcenter.org. And so if you have any questions, if you want to read our student handbook and so on and so forth, you're going to find all of the information there, and we try to respond to you as quickly as possible to make sure that you take the step of applying. So the first thing is about like why a certificate. So our seminars and workshops, they are graduate level in terms of how they are ranked, and they allow people to get very close to scholars, research, and other researchers from all around the world. I've seen time and time again work being delivered out of these seminars. We have a bunch of students who have started to collaborate together and to have done exhibitions or texts or other sorts of outputs together because of actually getting to work on seminars together for the first time. And so the certificate is very good for expanding your network, helping you transition to another area or another subject of expertise. So we've had people that are from design transitioning into art, from the arts transitioning into philosophy, and all types of pathways that you can imagine. And also as a good way to get into a new agenda of research. So I've seen a lot of people do that in between degrees. So like if they want to try something different for their PhD and they just finished their master's, or if they want to like prepare for applying for a master's. And but we also have far more experienced researchers. I've had the people in the certificate program that are actually already tenured professors right now, a couple of them, and it's always fascinating. I think it's a chance for anybody that wants to enrich what they do from a perspective that they feel that is close to what the New Center has been doing for this last 10 years. And in terms of how do you complete a certificate program, right? Because a lot of people have this fear of, okay, what are the requirements? What do I have to do? We are a very, and I say this as somebody that has started my relationship with the New Center as a student and that now works in as student services as well. And we are very, I would say that we're one of the most humane institutions I've been a part of and I've been work on. And and the requirements are made to be precisely possible to not really push you into delivering something to us, but to give you the platform to actually build something for yourself through our help. And for instance, to complete the certificate, you have to finalize 10 seminar credits. As you can see, each seminar credit means a set of 4 classes, so we have 1 or 2 credit seminars and workshops. And we usually forecast this to happen during your first year of study, which are the first 2 seasons you attend. So for example, if you're joining us now, we would expect your credits to be completed by the end of the upcoming fall-winter season 2025-26. So aside from this season that we have just launched, you would also be able to take advantage of all the other lineup of seminars that we are going to launch in spring, summer 2025. So this means that there is a lot of flexibility. Some people complete far more than 10 credits. We don't put a cap on the amount of credits that you have to pick, so you can fulfill many seminars provided they are available, and so on and so forth, and also some workshops if there are places available for that. But usually there's like I've had people already. I think the largest I've seen was somebody that did 30 something credits over a large period of time, but there you have a lot of people who finished 10, 12, 15 credits in like even less than that. So it's very feasible. And also each seminar is completed by achieving a certain grade, and all the grades are split between attendance, group presentations, participation, and the final work. And the only requirement we make is that you take the seminar by your programmer in your first and on your second semester, on your second season, that is. And this is very important. You're gonna because you're gonna get close to the person who's then going to do your consultations about your research when you're about to finalize the course, the certificate. And beside these, you can also have orientations with Mohammed during the course of the certificate program, and also on your after you have finished these and you have done your orientations, you're expected to deliver a final work, which can be a book project, even like an exhibition project. It can be article, and this can be published either by our own publishing channels or perhaps by other publishing channels that are interested in our work. Basically, we are super open in terms of the format. We are happy with whatever your assigned programmer who is going to do the consultations with you while you develop that work agrees to evaluate. And basically, after 1 year of taking seminars, you have another year to finalize your final work, in which you can actually focus on research and you can actually have good drafts to take to the consultation and then finish the program. And in terms of time balance, this is a question that a lot of you ask me. This depends a lot on your case, but I have to tell you that we have a bunch of students in different situations. We have people working in between degrees, full-time jobs, also freelance work on design, art institutions, and we tend to be very flexible with the pace in which students fulfill their requirements. And also the minimum of 10 credits over the first year is very manageable. And there's also the possibility, if you didn't manage to fulfill those requirements during your first year, of actually doing the second one, right? And lastly, in terms of the documents, we are talking about here, we only ask you for a letter of intent and a writing sample. Neither of them has any formal constraints, but my recommendation for the letter would be around 300 to 400 words maximum, so 1 to 2 pages sort of. And for the writing sample, we are talking about a smaller document of 1,000 to 1,500 words, just a little bit more. And it can be a part of a published or unpublished text where you display your writing and your theorizing qualities and something that you believe is representative of your work. Of course, it never has to be 100% accurate with what you're thinking at the moment, but something that shows that you can actually develop an idea and like how do you work as a researcher. And for the letter of intent, it's basically to talk about your need for financial relief and how does your trajectory of research aligns with the new center. And yeah, those are most of the questions that I received so far. If you have any extra questions, please do let me know and email me at studentservices@thenewcenter.org. And I'm going to pass it to Georgiana. And I'd like to thank Georgiana so much for her work here today. And yes, for great moderation. Georgiana?
Thank you, Raphael. Well, my final word is open for, or is dedicated to the new applicants, to people who want to join us this season, and as well as former students. To both of whom I wish good luck with their applications or their ongoing work. And thank you, Raphael, and thank you, Reza, Jason, and Cécile, for the work tonight, but also besides the scene, because it's quite consistent and also significant. So thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.